It's another Experience Action podcast. And today is our special episode, CX Pulse Check, where once a month we check in to find out what's happening in customer experience and what we can all learn from it. I'm so excited that you're here. My name is Jeannie Walters. I am founder and CEO of Experience Investigators. And today I'm thrilled to have a special co host with us. David Sakamoto is a name many of us already know. He has been well known in the customer success space. And I was lucky enough to do some work while he was at GitLab. David, welcome to the Experience Action Podcast and to the CX Pulse Check. We're so happy you're here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm super excited. I've been really looking forward to this because I really admire what you do and the thought leadership you bring to the industry and educating a broad range of us in different functions and areas. And so it's super appreciated. And I'm thankful and grateful for the opportunity to connect.
Thank you. You're literally making me blush. I don't know if you see that, but so David, I would love for you to share a little bit more about your career, your, background. You have such an interesting, diverse journey. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I have this very eclectic background. I always laugh because if customer success didn't come along, I'd probably be wandering around trying to find what I want to do. But I have this really kind of background of, operations, product and engineering, services, program management, which I think is really helpful for the customer success because you kind of need that demand of how do you build things to scale, having great, product led value adoption type of methodologies, collaborating across broad groups. But it's been super helpful. And so I'm grateful for customer success because it's helped me leverage that diverse experience that I built out.
Yeah. Well, if our listeners and viewers have not already started following you on LinkedIn, I recommend they do that because you're always sharing good things too there. So thank you for that. And I'm excited to jump in because I think a lot of times when we talk about customer experience, we often are kind of bringing that one angle. And I love that you're bringing a slightly different angle with the background in customer success. So can you share a little bit of your definition of customer success as it fits into
Yeah.
customer experience?
Absolutely. I think ultimately customer success is helping customers achieve their desired outcome with your solution. And I
Mhm.
really think about it as kind of two ways. Is one, you're driving customer value through adoption of the solution and building designing an engagement that's just a team, but really across the organization. How do you deliver value to the customer? How do you deliver those outcomes? But then the second part of that is on the interest of the business, right? So ultimately it's there to drive, net revenue growth, at minimum revenue protection, gross retention, but ideally you're going to be driving growth. So I always think of it as that two view is of, driving that value, but on the same part, using that value to drive growth to the business.
Mhm. And I think it was kind of born out of the whole B2B tech industry and that those products, but the exciting thing I'm seeing is now people are applying these same kind of CX organizational structures and principles, or CS, I should say, customer success principles,
Yeah.
to other types of businesses, mostly B2B, but they are really exploring like, how can we make sure it's good for this one account, this one client, and what can we learn from that and pull across to make it successful for everybody, right? Because we're learning all the time in B2B. It's more of a partnership, I think,
Yeah.
than sometimes we give it credit for.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things that's constantly evolving, right? I think of
Mhm.
perpetual software was kind of, hey, we high CSAT and we got a support renewal, right?
Yep.
But then when SaaS came along, we realized the customer doesn't own the solution, so you have to provide that continuous value. But yeah, it's really great. I mean, the basic principle of driving growth through value delivery can be applied everywhere. I'm
Mhm.
just figuring out what is the appropriate approach given the economics of the solution, your customer needs,
Mhm.
and so kind of how do you design that, whether it's B2B or B2C, the same principles can be applied, but you have to think about it thoughtfully and very specifically to that customer set and product.
Yep. Exactly. Well, I'm excited to dive in. We have a couple of articles, media to share because this is all about kind of finding out what are we talking about right now. And it's July 2024 and people are talking about, shocker, AI.
Isn't it everywhere? It's great.
It's everywhere. And so I wanted to start with this article. It's actually from I wanted to start with this article from Glossy. And this is really where we are looking at the state of AI in fashion, how AI is transforming design, marketing, and the next generation of CX. And what stood out to me, and I should say this is a sponsored article. So there was a report sponsored by Basic slash Department, I think is how you say that. But what was kind of interesting to me was that a lot of the things that we talk about with how AI can personalize the experience, make the experience better in general, uh, fashion is kind of waking up in a different way. And so they're applying some of those things, but really making sure that they are kind of customizing for the customer. And there's this whole other kind of retail and seasonality aspect to this. So, what did you think here? What did this bring up for you when thinking about how fashion is leaning into AI as well?
Yeah, well, first, I just love just how many different applications that AI is being applied to. So
Mhm.
there's just this huge diversity of industries that people are using AI for. But it's funny, when I read through it, I was thinking, wow, there's also a ton of commonalities, right? So you think about
Right.
retail, they're driving revenue, they got supply chain optimization, inventory management, they have customer service,
Mhm.
and ideally, we're discussing is ultimately there's all these kind of broader things, but ultimately at the end of the day, you're buying fashion for an individual need or a purpose. So like how they're
Right.
using AI to customize that specifically for you and your taste and their fit.
Mhm.
So it was
Yeah.
super interesting to kind of, it's always delightful to see the applications there. But it was great. I
Mhm.
also saw a ton of alignment in terms of what we're trying to do B2B and what they're trying to do in fashion.
Well, and I think one of the things that I'm kind of watching as well is that there's been this whole movement around kind of personal values as well. And so one of those might be sustainability or how is the workforce treated? And people are starting to buy based on their values in bigger and bigger ways. The next generations coming up are very focused on this. So one of the things that struck me about kind of how we customize the experience could be around that, right? Could be around saying, we want to be as transparent as possible. So we're going to use AI to really show you where does this supply chain lead? How are the suppliers, providing workforce enablement and things like that so that people can feel really good about their personal purchases as well. And the article didn't dive into that, but I'm starting to see that in fashion in different ways, especially around sustainability and kind of making sure that we have a circular economy and all of those things. So it just like opens up all this possibility around scale, around some of those very personal choices.
And especially there was a funny SNL skit about that. What's the thing where it's called that kind of speed junk fashion? I can't remember
Oh,
the term
yes,
for it,
I know exactly the skit
but
you're talking about. Yes.
but like having that visibility to know that the products you purchased were you're done with labor that's treated
Yep.
fairly, that's paid fairly, that's working reasonable hours and reasonable conditions. But oh, talking about AI, my phone just turns on all automatically. So there we go. Um, but yeah, it's interesting how that would be applied there.
Mhm,
But there's
mhm,
so many alignments in like B2B of like customization and how we look at digital,
mhm.
churning contraction in terms of the return rates for those products. So it's
Yeah.
very cool.
So, and I think the other thing that AI can open up is there are times I'm sure, like in customer success, that you start to see patterns, but it's not because the data is telling you necessarily. It's because you have 2 customer success managers who are talking about clients, right? And they go, "Oh, they said no because of this. Oh, my guy said no because of this too," right? They start finding patterns before they become data points. And I think AI is going to allow us to recognize those trends and patterns in an earlier way too. So your point about returns, I think that's a huge opportunity.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's like it's funny. I'm a kind of a CS nerd if you haven't figured out already. So I'll think in my free time of like, oh, what if I could do all these things? Like, like what if I could like customize, give you exactly the right thing, exactly the right time, to exactly the right person,
Mhm.
to literally it's serving, exactly, just in time, content or
Yep.
engagement. But ultimately, it's always been constrained by how much data can you consume and manage,
Mhm.
because you're looking at adoption data, you're looking at sentiment, you're looking at different personas. They're all different levels in their journey. They all have different issues, different specific needs. And so, the data management aspect of AI and
Mhm.
being able to do that and not resulting from a fixed analyst project is
Right,
super fascinating. Like, I think
right.
we're just at the front end of it. We're still trying to figure out how to. I mean, we're very nascent in terms of the
Yes.
technology and how do we manage that, but it's really exciting.
Yeah, I think so too, and I think that's something that the more we learn about what AI can do there, the more we're gonna lean into it, and the more we're going to the faster we're all gonna get on it and everything. So and speaking of customer success and software and, hey, why not AI too? Let's talk about it.
Yeah,
This was really I this is really about, kind of the software market. This is from OpenPR, and the headline is "Customer Success Software Market Looks to Expand Its Size in Overseas Market." And while that's the headline, this was really just about the growth of the market for customer success software and how there's so much demand right now for really figuring this out. So I thought it would be interesting to get your perspective on kind of where are we in this journey and what should our listeners and the people who are leading their customer experience and customer success efforts, what should we know about kind of this drive, this demand for customer success?
yeah. I guess, Jeannie, can I ask you a question? Am I allowed to answer that question without talking about AI? Because it seems like AI is the big elephant in everybody's room.
I know. You are allowed to do whatever you want here,
Okay.
David. You just said you were a CS nerd. You are our people.
Yeah. All right. Okay. We go. We got our put on our nerd caps. So, I think the AI piece is going to be, and we talked a little about just harnessing all that data,
Yeah.
which will be, if you think of customers, very similar to customer experience, like you have an immense amount of data sources. In which, we're on the front end of that maturity cycle, right? And so you see cool things
Mhm.
like, hey, I can, like probably everybody independent of their function knows, like, you summarize your Zoom meeting, right? And in actions and stuff like that. So there's a
Oh,
bunch of
isn't that so
productivity in
cool?
that.
That's like
It's
one of
cool.
my
I mean,
favorite features.
it's like, hey, auto respond to emails, which, I think
Mhm.
there's still a little touch and go of how did those, the quality of how much
Yeah.
time you're saving there. You're seeing better digital engagement, you're seeing much better chatbots and things like
Mhm.
that,
Mhm.
helping you customize your content in a more dynamic way.
Mhm.
Predictive analytics have been around for a while. They're just getting better.
Yep.
Sentiment analysis is always one that I think is better for like technology rather because you can cherry pick your
Yep.
qualitative feedback to kind of tell whatever story you want. So I like the fact of kind of abstracting it for a technology to summarize.
Mhm.
Um, but I think those, get on the front end of the cycle, moving forward, I think there's some really fascinating things around how do you get more sophisticated on just your view of customers, like segmentation, whether it's
Mhm.
market led, what region are they in, what vertical are they in, what's the maturity of engagement with your solution, attribution,
Mhm.
like what
Yeah.
activities drive the right result. So it's about getting at that right thing at the right time. Well, what is the right thing? Like our ability to kind of understand and harness that, A/B
Mhm.
testing, all of those cool things. But what I'm seeing is it kind of gets back to the customer success platforms are kind of taking that front end, that productivity stuff, which is great. I mean, it's saving a
Mhm.
ton of time, efficiency, especially in a market where companies need to be more efficient, right? And
Yep.
so that's super helpful. But I think really in the future, correlating activity to result and being able
Yes.
to predict that in a very dynamic, real time way and drive the right action, whether it's a CSM or whether it's digital engagement, like
Mhm.
there's a really fantastic opportunity, not only for again, going back to customer success, not only for the customers, but also for the company.
Right. And I think there are 2 things that kind of made me pause, I guess, and think about this when I saw there's all this worldwide activity right now around this. Like everybody's trying to adopt AI, everybody's trying to figure it out. Everybody knows that it is the solution to something. We just don't always know what the problem is yet,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
And and when I saw that this was such a worldwide demand, one of the things that struck me was, we talk a little bit about inclusive customer experience, and some of that means speaking the customer's language. Some of that
Yeah,
means understanding their region, where their life experiences, where they are from. And so we've been limited because not every human speaks every language, right? So we can only have so much. But now with AI, we're able to get closer to that. But going back to what you said about the autoresponder, we have to make sure it's actually human enough, right?
Yeah.
Like, we have to make sure that we have guardrails. My older son is in college now, and he's taking an English course right now, and he said one of his teachers dinged him for AI language, and he had written the whole thing. So now he takes his draft and puts it into the AI checker and changes it if it says it's too close to AI. And so I'm like, we're literally
Interesting.
in like bizarro land right? So I think we're going to like really have to think about that as the leaders in customer success and customer experience about when we just flip the switch and we think like, oh, AI knows the language, we can just do this. We have to be really cautious about that and make sure that we're taking the right steps to really show up the way we want to show up and are because otherwise, just like it can lead to organizational success, that could be a disaster for an organization
Yeah.
too, right?
I think we've all gone through our kind of discovery cycle in AI because it was like, oh my gosh, this is
Yeah.
amazing. And I had plenty of late nights playing around with ChatGTP, asking all kinds of questions, and you're like, oh, I'm going to start deploying this. And I think, a lot of us personally, but also in our organizations, like, oh, great,
Mhm.
I'm going to start deploying this everywhere. And then all of a sudden you realize, well, wait a minute, it brings up a lot of questions. I'll pick the simple
Mhm.
one, right? Oh, write my email. Here's my bullets, and it writes email, and I'm like,
Mhm.
whoa, that's a lot of
Yeah.
words, and then that's not how I would write it, and using very flowery language, and
Mhm.
it's not how I'd write it from a voice perspective. It's more
Right.
words than I would choose. It's formatted not the way that would, and so I was like, oh wait, and you kind of edit, and I don't know if I don't know if I saved time or spent more time there.
Yeah.
So I think that's just a basic, commonly understood example, but I think all organizations, they look to apply the technology. They're going through that discovery cycle around, privacy and,
Yep.
is it producing the right content? Is aligned with what we'd want? Is it actually correct? Right?
Right.
Because
Right.
AI can make
Right.
some things up sometimes too, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's I think right now we're going to go through kind of the rocky middle of this
yeah,
journey where we're going to figure out a lot of things just by mistakes happening and by people maybe making the wrong choice and then learning from it and all of those things. So I think we have to both have those guardrails for our teams, but then we also have to have some grace for like, yes, we're all figuring this
yep,
out and we're all experimenting. So, and speaking of teams, I had the privilege of working with GitLab a little bit, and
yeah. Thank you for
I
that.
well, oh my gosh, thank you. It was such a fun thing to do, but one of the things that just impressed me to no end was the transparency there. Like, it
Yeah,
is at a whole other level, and when people talk about transparency, they are not talking about what you all do, and I just thought it was such a great way to build trust and really the team embraced it in such a powerful way, and so one of the last, article here that I have, I think it kind of goes into that team dynamic a little bit and how important it is to show up with trust and transparency. This is from Business Insurance. You never know the sources I'm gonna bring on
yeah, I
to
love
the
it.
podcast. But, this said, "Focus on core values improves comp disability outcomes," and this is from a risk manager. And the basic gist of this is that a company was having a lot of workman's comp claims. And not only that, but once people have a workman's comp claim, they often will just not come back. They will have permanent
Yep,
disability and just not be back in the workforce. And so, what this company did, they're called Overhead Door Corporation. They figured out, they said, well, look, what if we treat people differently when they're entering into that workman's comp journey? And that meant assigning somebody who personally really checked in with them, helped them navigate, helped them with the medical stuff, and really just showed up with a lot more empathy. And what they found was all of their stats improved, including the
yep,
return to work, the number of workman's comp claims actually went down. People were more likely to stay with the company, all sorts of great outcomes. And I think so much of this relates to that idea of like, let's be authentic and transparent and build trust within our organizations. Because if you think about what this does for the customer experience, of course, you want somebody who's been there a while, who knows what they're doing, who is able to come back, who is loyal to the company, who knows the rules, all of those things. You and I have both been through where when you hire somebody, it's an expensive process.
yep.
It's expensive in time and effort and everything. And so this is just something that I thought was like a great case study of when we talk about trust and transparency and building on values, this is what it looks like. And I know you did that at GitLab, so I'd love your perspective here.
Yeah, and I was thinking from a CX perspective, you can't have a great customer experience without a great employee experience, right?
Amen. Yes.
And so, I think ultimately investment in having, you know, strong set of core values that are operationalized, that are communicated, role modeled, are
Mhm.
really critical. And it's not, it's funny. I gave a presentation on how to scale,
Mhm.
a company to some early stage companies, and I included values. Like you wouldn't think of
Yes.
like develop a strong set of values. Like it seems kind of squishy human stuff, but like you said, it has, you're going to scale the organization as you get bigger, larger teams. You're going to have that
Mhm.
commonly shared set of values that above the hundreds or maybe thousands of micro decisions you may make a day, they're going to be made in directional alignment,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
And ultimately, if you can retain people, um, you can attract people. These have hard, positive impact on, cost savings.
Mhm.
Um, and I give an example at when I first started GitLab, we were smaller, right? So we had a company meeting every day. We get the new team members get introduced, and one of the questions was, "Why did you come to GitLab?"
Mm.
And over 90% of the time, people would say the values.
Ugh, I love that. I love
And
that.
it was funny. On top of that, our CEO said, "Hey, by the way, do you know why I asked that?" And he says, I want to remind you all why people are deciding to join the company. So to make sure we preserve these things. So yeah, it was
Mhm.
interesting values. And if we got too big to have a company meeting every day,
Yeah, that would have been tough.
I still ask all new team members that, and they would inevitably almost say that every time.
It's a great example of it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with even the purchase choices. We want to live our values as people. I think that's an inherently human part of the experience of being on this world. And so aligning that in the right way with both where you shop and where you work and the people you work
Yep.
with, I think that just enriches people's lives in a really powerful way.
Totally, you nailed it. In fact, I would people would oftentimes ask me what makes somebody successful at GitLab, and I would always say, there's a different operating principles, but like one of them would be if the core values of GitLab align to your core values, that's
Mhm.
great, right?
Mhm.
That's a good foundation. If they don't, then this is not the place for you. Like
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I saw people kind of come in and the system, you reject that person rejects the system or otherwise, it's because they just at the end of the day, oftentimes they didn't have alignment to those values like
Mhm.
transparency and collaboration and diversity.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's and we spend so much time at work, right?
Yeah,
You don't
exactly.
want to be somebody else. You want to be
Right.
authentic to yourself.
That is so, so true, and like I was talking about with the transparency at GitLab, that impressed me so much because it also allowed people to show up, as their authentic selves and kind of not apologize for it, and everybody was because there was kind of nowhere to hide, right? There was no need to hide. It was just about like, "Hey, we're all trying to go after this common goal. We're all trying to do our best work, and we're gonna do our best to get there." And so it was it's a powerful culture. And then, I am not quite as big as GitLab, but we are scaling my business now. Not quite at the same scale.
Yeah, yeah,
But, one of the things we do is we have a quarterly meeting, and every time we go over our values, and it's because I don't want people to forget. I don't want them to forget that we are committed to certain things, and part of that is I always think of values as it becomes what you do, but it's really about who you are and how you
yeah,
show up. And I think that's where we as CX and CS leaders have a dramatic impact on that because these are people who are showing up not just for one another in a powerful way, but also for our customers. So
yeah,
they have to align with all of these ideas. So yeah,
yeah.
that was
I was gonna
cool.
say, and a lot of times I tell people, it's not like you have to do this whole like major thing. Like I love the fact just by talking about it,
Mhm.
as a leader of your business, it tells people that's important,
Yep.
right? I was lucky enough to stay at the St. Regis one time,
Oh,
and
beautiful.
their experience was phenomenal. Every single person was very consistent from a CX, like everybody went above and
Mhm.
beyond. And I caught the GM one time. I said, "What do you do?" And funny thing, what he said was, every day we take out one of the values and someone brings up examples of how they leveraged it. Just a
Mhm.
simple conversation.
Yep.
And I used the transparency one was one that like came across it at GitLab. When I first started, I thought I was transparent, right? And so everybody's in software, once in a while you have a problem in software, right?
What?
Once in a blue moon, right? And so I think of the big customer, that big problem, and you come and you go, oh, you have the meeting with engineering, and you're like, okay, what to
Mhm.
do? Here's the information. And then you go, what's the next step? Okay, great. And at the end of the meeting, we'd go, okay, what are you going to tell the customer? Right?
Yep.
uh, at GitLab, we would just tell them everything. In fact, we had a couple
Mhm.
times we had a pretty big problem. We thought there was, luckily it didn't come about. But we proactively went out to customers and told them, hey, if we were aware of this thing may happen if it does, and we gave them all information to even our
Mhm.
biggest customers. And I tell you, when I first started, it made me super nervous. Like, oh, are we really going to say that? Like,
Yeah.
and what I learned from that experience was that ultimately it built a lot of trust
Mhm.
because customers knew we would tell them everything we knew. We would never hide things from our customers. And so very much it helped build a brand and and not only in helping existing customers, sometimes prospects would come because we know during the sales cycle, we didn't tell them make up things. Right. And
Right.
I always got asked like when customers say do things get oversold. Right. And I'll go, I didn't really have that problem because we were
Yep.
say this works, this doesn't work, that we had maturity. We'd openly tell customers. So I totally think as you think about scaling your business with values, like it does not only help internal, it helps economics,
Mhm.
but also provides, your brand and what customers should expect and how they engage you.
Yep, exactly, exactly, and that's something we talk about with our clients is this idea of you have to know who you are first before you can show the customer who you are, and that means that you have to have alignment around that, and if you don't, then everybody's coming to the table with their own life experience and judgment calls, and it's not that either one is wrong, right? Like, you and I might have a different opinion about how to handle something. They might both be correct,
Yeah.
but if but then they create that inconsistency for the customer and lowered expectations and all of that. So it really is something that I think we have to weave into everything we do and how we show up both inside and outside our organization. And I just, I know you've been leading the way, so thank you for that. But overall, this was a great conversation. I feel like we could keep going, but we people probably have things to do other than listen to our podcast. But this was so great, David. Thank you so much for all that you're doing. And if our listeners are interested, how can they connect with you?
Like I said, LinkedIn is probably the best way.
Mhm.
Feel free. I'm active and responsive there. I'm also on Twitter, Pop Up Power at Twitter.
Great.
But LinkedIn is probably the best one. LinkedIn or Twitter are probably the best ways.
Awesome. And we'll put that in the show notes as well. So thank you so much for being here. And thank all of you for being here with us. I am so thrilled that you are on this journey with us to learn more about customer experience. As you know, you can leave me a voicemail at askjeannie.vip and I will respond on the Experience Action podcast. So don't be shy. You can leave that with your name or anonymously. And once a month, we'll bring you CX Pulse Check so you can keep your finger on the pulse of what's next. Thank you so much for being here, and we will talk next week.